Today I'm making seafood dressing, and I'm going to start by making cornbread. You could use store-bought cornbread or use a box of Jiffy corn muffin mix. I'm making mine from scratch. I have 1 cup of yellow cornmeal, 2/3 cup of all-purpose flour, 2 tablespoons of sugar, a half teaspoon of salt, 1 tablespoon of baking powder. I'm adding 1 large egg, 3/4 of a cup of whole milk. I'm going to give that a good mix. And I'm going to be baking this in an 8x8 baking dish. I've already added grease. You could butter it or grease it. And I'll be baking this in a preheated oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for about 20 to 25 minutes. Once the cornbread is done, I'm going to remove it from the oven and cut it into cubes and crumble it and put it back into my oven to continue baking for another 20 minutes or until it is a bit drier and golden brown and crispy on the edges. Now for the rest of the ingredients. I'm going to be using half of an onion, half of a red bell pepper, and this little piece of green bell pepper that I had left over. Just 1 small bell pepper works for this recipe. 2 celery sticks and 3 cloves of fresh garlic. I'm also using an assortment of dried seasonings and spices. I'll be using 1 to 1.5 teaspoons of Old Bay seasoning. You could use Cajun or Creole in place of this. Also, half teaspoon of onion powder, a half teaspoon of garlic powder, a 1/4 teaspoon of cayenne pepper, a half teaspoon of rubbed sage. Here I have a 1/4 teaspoon of smoked paprika and a 1/4 teaspoon of dried thyme. Actually, I think I'll use a half teaspoon of dried thyme. You can change the ratios of these seasonings and spices to your preference. I also have 8 ounces of lump crab meat, 10 ounces of medium shrimp. You could use small shrimp in place of this. And here I'm going to be using a cup to a cup and a half of vegetable broth. And the way I made this vegetable broth is I had 2 cups of boiling water and I added half of a vegetable bouillon cube. And I just crumbled it into the water and gave it a good mix. And this is what I'm using. You could also use a store-bought vegetable broth or a store-bought low-sodium chicken broth. It's really up to you, but I'm going to give this a go today. I will also be using 4 tablespoons of unsalted butter in this recipe, and I will be adding salt and pepper to taste. Here in a preheated pan, I've added 1 tablespoon of cooking oil. To that, I'm adding my 4 tablespoons of butter. I'm going to melt down the butter. And once it's melted down, just like this, I'm going to add my chopped bell pepper, onion, celery, and minced garlic. I'm also going to be adding a pinch of salt, and I'm going to cook this and saute it until the onions are translucent and everything is softened and cooked through. Now that everything is cooked and sauteed, I'm going to add cracked black pepper to taste, and I'm going to start adding my shrimp. And I'm going to combine and mix in the seasonings and spices. You're going to want to combine, mix this well, and saute the shrimp for about 2 minutes. At this point, I do have my burner on a medium-high to high heat. And once this is combined and sauteed, I'm going to add my crab meat, give that a mix, and saute for an additional minute, and this is done. Now it's time to assemble this dressing. Here I have my baked crumbled cornbread, and I'm going to add my seafood mixture to that, and I'm just going to combine and mix well. Once everything is combined, now I'm adding my cup of vegetable broth. I would say a cup to a cup and a half works. And if you don't want to bake your own cornbread, you could use around 4 cups of those pre-made cornbread crumbs that you buy at the grocery store. That also works. Now I'm going to add 1 large egg and combine well. If you don't want to add an egg, you don't have to, but I find adding the large egg into the dressing mix gives it a lighter texture and it also binds it. Once everything is combined well and mixed, I'm going to add it right back into my baking dish that I cooked the cornbread in. I added a little more grease to it, and that's it. And of course, I am using my clean hands to do this. I'm going to just spread it evenly in the baking dish, cover with foil, And I'm going to be baking this in a preheated oven at 375 degrees covered for 25 minutes. Then I'm going to uncover it and bake it for an additional 15, or until the top gets golden brown and crusty. My dressing is now baked and ready. You can let it set for 10 minutes or serve right away. And this is actually a meal in itself, or you could serve it as a side alongside blackened fish and maybe some garlicky butter green beans. I will link a lemon garlic green bean recipe that I've done before. It really does pair well with this. So I hope you give this recipe a try. I hope you like it, and thanks for watching.